Welcome to the JAMODI podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is JAMODI, just a matter of doing it. Coaches, the JAMODI podcast is powered by Shoot 360. The future of basketball has arrived in Dallas-Fort Worth. Shoot 360 combines the latest sports technology with the fundamentals of basketball skill development. The result is a one-of-a-kind video game-like basketball program designed to improve your shooting, dribbling, and passing. Visit shoot360dfw.com to learn more and register for your free 1-hour workout evaluation. Shoot 360, the future of basketball is here. One thing we've talked a little bit about culture, started diving in. I think culture building activities can be a way to catapult or push culture forward, but it's not the main thing, right? Like culture is 1,000 little things that you say and do with your team every day, but those activities can be huge. So what's one culture building activity that you really like?
Like for us, and we're still kind of getting into it and trying to establish it because it is first year and stuff, but I really like to get their input on like, what does a winner and a loser look like in y'all's opinion? Like we'll sit in a classroom, we'll talk like, will you define what a winner, like mentality and everything, mentality, what does it look like out on the floor, in life, all that stuff versus, winner mentality, loser's mentality, compare those two and then try to tie it back in. And I've got some ideas and acronyms and stuff like that I think kind of tie together just because that's what I like to do. That's kind of how my mind goes to stuff. And so I'm just kind of different things like that, I guess, just communicating in classrooms and discussing those things. And yeah. I mean, that's kind of my one big thing is we just discuss those. And then also the expectations, I guess, like expectations of what do we do on, like, what does a game need to look like? Like if I walk into a locker room before a game, like what does it need to look like for y'all to be mentally prepared? Or if we're on the bus, how much time do you need to be mentally prepared? Does it need to be completely quiet? Do we need to, turn the lights off? Like, I think every kid's different. And like for me, when I was playing, I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to have any interaction. I wanted to put my music in, focus, say some prayers in my head and kind of just be very introverted that way before I played a game. And, some people aren't like that. If they sit there and they think too much, like they just start getting psyched out. And so if you could let them be their personality and understand how they are, hopefully it'll help them to perform a little bit better. So, we talk about different things of like, I kind of let them set some of that stuff. And through my questioning, we can lead them into a direction that's somewhat of a happy medium where it's not just a circus, but it allows them to be a little bit more of their personality to hopefully feel like they're getting prepared for games and also that they have a voice in the situation. If we want it to be a good experience, like it needs to be something that they enjoy doing and stuff like that. And even things for like being late, those little kind of like minor punishments and stuff, like we'll talk about that as a team and try to come up. And I've had players say stuff that's a lot harsher than what I was going to give them. And you kind of find out like, okay, well, I guess this, they're serious about this too. And like, okay, well, we can't spend all practice running because you showed up 1 minute late, but there might need to be a consequence and an expectation that we're going to be there on time and all that stuff. So just that stuff. And then something I stole from Sledge at Central is after a workout, we all go around, we give each other high fives, tell each other good job. It might have been bad practice, but it's going to be the one time that somebody gets maybe a pat on the back and an attaboy and trying to it might have been a bad practice, but starting to set the tone for let's not just beat a dead horse and talk basketball and be angry all the time. There's a bigger focus outside of hoops.
The thing that jumped out at me, and you kind of slipped it in, was that you take them to the classroom. And I think changing environments is a really good idea. When Coach K is in practice, they rarely huddle at the same place. He'll move it all over kind of strategically. I think there's times to have these types of talks in the gym. There's times to do them in the weight room. There's times in the locker room. There's times to take them to a classroom. The nice thing about the classroom is I feel like it's where they spend time learning. So it's a good way to get them already in that mode, whether it's film, whether it's note taking in the classroom. Yeah. Love the question method, because instead of us just saying, hey, get this down, man, let's help them get to the place, lead them to the place where we want them to be. You started off by saying, a question like, what does a winner versus a loser look like? I love those types of questions. And what it made me think of is culture breakers. So many times, and Shawnee Harley talked about that, so many times we just focus on our culture and the good things that are going to come from it. This is what it's going to look like when our culture is right. Yeah. And that's okay. We want to set, like, that's what a winner looks like. But there's going to be times when we're losers. There's going to be times when culture breaks down. It's not a matter of when it breaks or if it breaks down, but when. And we need to know what it's like. So if toughness is one of our pillars, what does it look like when toughness isn't there, when it breaks down? Well, that might look like when we're making excuses. Yeah, like making excuses isn't tough. And what are we going to do when a player or a group of us, maybe myself, when we're making excuses? We got to confront that. We got to talk about that. I think when you have those kind of questions, you get to not just talk about the fairy tale land where everything works out the way you want. You talk about real life and how things are going to break down.
I was having that conversation with like a student today a little bit. They were saying that, they were struggling with how things were going. It was hard to be positive in the situation. It's like, yeah, but that's life. Like, you're getting a great crash course lesson right now. Like, stuff isn't going right for you. You have to practice positivity. There's lots of things that I have to experience on a day-to-day basis that's like, I don't really want to do this, or this is not fun, enjoyable process to me, but it's all part of kind of the bigger picture. And you find out again, like, you really find out who you are when stuff isn't going right. If you can be a better person, and that's where I think real confidence comes from, is like when you just mess up and mess up and mess up and you still find a way to get through it. And then you learn along the way, like, you just look back and go like, I accomplished something hard. Like, my hardest teachers, it was awful taking their class. Like, it was terrible. Like, you were always writing papers and reading and having to think a lot and studying all the time. And it was awful. But when you got to the end of the course and you made the grade and hopefully passed, you look back and you go like, that teacher was awesome. Like, I learned so much more, just not only content wise, but about myself, because I did something hard. Like, I think we steal a lot of that from kids, and, that goes from coaches to parents and everything. Like, I don't want my son to grow up and just be a baby and be a whiner and complainer. Above all else, other than loving God and, being a Christian and following that right path, I just want him to be like a tough, confident person. And if, stuff isn't going right, that he's not going to sit there and whine and be a baby his whole life, that he's going to have some toughness and grit about him. And so
a little alarm kind of just like went off on my head, thinking that message that you just were telling that kid, or maybe you're telling your team that, like, guys, hey, we need to handle mistakes well in our life. When things aren't going right, what do we do? Like, that's a great message. We got to be careful, though, that we're not coaching them almost in the opposite way of blowing up at their mistakes, making their mistakes seem like it's the worst thing that can happen to our program, and you are letting us down, and you're such a bad player that you shouldn't. That's why you're not on the floor. Like before we know it, the great message that we're telling them, maybe in a meeting, or the words that we have on our wall or that are on the back of their chest, or back of our shirts, like, are we living those out with how we're actually coaching them? And it just made me think a lot about the beginning of our talk, of how ugly the practices are feeling right now and how many mistakes are being made. Great opportunities to help them, to reinforce what you're just talking about, what's going to happen in life. Like, use those moments. And it sounded like you did in that moment right there in practice. But I think we sometimes break down our own culture that we're trying to set because we do say the right things, but like more is caught than taught. Like, how are we acting in a game? If in our culture, every player has to shoot an open shot. It doesn't matter who the best player is or the worst. If you're open, that is the goal of our offense, is to create that look. You shoot it. That's an expectation. Well, when that player does it, do I act upset when they miss? Do I sit down or slump when they miss? Or do I just clap and say, beautiful, next, right? Like,
Yeah.
what I'm saying to them, I got to make sure that my actions are following up with that.
I think kind of one of like my favorite kind of sayings, and something I try to keep in the back of my head, is like, what like a leader does in moderation, like its followers do in excess. So if I cuss in practice, like, I feel like a lot of kids are going to cuss, all the time. And, my parents grew up, they didn't drink. I've never drank before. Just, it was something they didn't do. I didn't get used to being in that environment, right or wrong, however you feel about, that situation. But there's just so many little things that if you're a complainer in front of players all the time and you always whine and fuss about the refs, what do you think they're going to do? Like, you're giving them the green light and the go ahead of just blaming it on somebody else all the time. I don't want my fate to be in the hands of a guy with black and white stripes on. Like, I want to control my fate, and what he calls, I might not agree with, but I'm not going to sit there and try to just beat a dead horse because I feel like he missed it. I can't control what he called. And there's going to be a lot of things in life that happen that I can't control. I did everything right. I did exactly what I was supposed to do. Somebody else got the promotion. There's so many situations that happen that, man, you just control what you can control. Your attitude, your effort, try to do the best you can, honor God with the way that you're living your life. And somehow it all works out. There's been so many things that I wish I'd have got along the way. You kind of find out, like, at the end of it, you go like, good thing I didn't get that. Like, I needed to learn this, and this to be able to be ready and have the character to be prepared for what was coming along the way. And in the moment it stinks, but God has a plan, and sometimes it's hard to relinquish that control.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.